Hello, and welcome to Upgrade Thought. Today, I will be speaking with Daniel Sokolovsky. Danny has lived in 5 countries in the last 7 years, coaching basketball at the professional level. In this episode, expect to hear all about his experiences coaching high-level athletes around the world, what it was like to take a head coaching job at age 27, how living in so many different countries has changed his perspective on life, Danny's mindset for navigating the extreme pressures of the coaching world, the acronym he uses to stay present, how reading about seemingly unrelated topics makes him better at his job, how much of a sacrifice it is to become a high performer, and more. Enjoy the show. Danny, thank you for doing this, man.
My pleasure. I'm excited.
We haven't spoken in a while, so how are you? How is the season? How's life?
Life is interesting. Um, I was with the New Zealand Breakers in the Australian League for my second season. We lost the first year I was there. We lost in essentially Game 7 of the league finals in the last few minutes. And we built a team that we thought was better than that previous team, trying to get over the hump. And we spent the whole season about 8 minutes together with the full roster. So injuries were an uh, unfortunately impacted us severely, and the best ability is availability. So that was suboptimal. Yeah, got back stateside a little while ago. Been doing some traveling, visiting some teams, trying to learn, meet some people, and now I'm in lovely South Florida, figuring out what's next.
Got it, man. Yeah, about the traveling. So one of the questions that I had was, over the last couple of years, you've been all over the world in a variety of different countries. So first, maybe I guess tell the listeners like where you've been, what you've been up to over the last couple of years, but also how does it change your perspective on basketball, on life, to just be in all of these different cultures and all these different places? How does that affect the way that you see the world?
Firstly, just give a little chronology to my basketball career overseas. Spent 2 years in Russia, a year in Israel, a year in Germany, a year in Slovakia, the last 2 years in New Zealand. I was also a month in China squeezed in there between Russia and Israel. So, definitely a exposure to a wide variety of cultures and ways of living and mentalities and types of people. And definitely enriched my perspective, broadening my world, helping me realize how much bigger the world is than Brooklyn, New York. But it's funny to see how different people are and yet come back to a lot of the core same fundamentals around what drives human behavior and what things like Maslow's needs, as far as like the
Mm.
hierarchy of needs that people have. um, and as different as we are, everybody is very similar. Everybody loves their kids, wants stability, wants comfort, wants to have their basic most fundamental needs met. They enjoy similar things, they take joy in similar things, as far as family and friends and the essence of community. It's how our species has evolved a little bit, kind of
Mm.
fundamental to how we operate. So it's definitely been illuminating to see different but the same, in a very general sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and one of those years you were a 27, right? You were a 27-year-old head coach
When I
in
took the job, yeah.
okay, got you, right. That was Slovakia, right?
Yes, it was Lucinic, Slovakia.
Yeah, so that's pretty rare, right, to be a head coach that young?
Yeah, I would say that European basketball, a lot of decision makers around Europe, high level, low level, not generally the most progressive thinkers. So, to entrust a professional team of any level to someone of that age and uh, that meager experience. I had been an assistant coach at 3 good levels over the previous 4 years. It's not a wealth of experience. It's a small sample. It was a risk. It definitely was a risk, and I was very lucky that somebody took that chance on me. Um, but yeah, not common.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm interested in sort of the mental challenges maybe that you sort of faced heading into that season? Like, was there any imposter syndrome? Were you like, I don't know if I can handle this. I'm only 27. This is a big risk. Talk about your thought process heading into this, and I guess how you worked through some of the uh, psychological obstacles.
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, when I one like that off season after I was leaving Germany, I'd been an assistant in the German first division, and I worked for an incredible coach, and he gave me a lot of room, a lot of responsibility. I definitely felt like I found my voice further as far as coaching a group, and over those 4 years, I'd collected a lot of notes, independent study, practical examples through the team of like things I knew I wanted to do, things I didn't want to do. Maybe the latter is even more important than the former. and I went into that offseason actively seeking an opportunity like the one I found. A low level, someone that needed to find a creative solution, a cheap solution, which I was making myself available at a low price point as far as coaching is concerned. Just trying to make myself as attractive as possible to beat out the more traditional hires, the safer hires, guys in their 40s and 50s, former European players, whatever it may be. But I also knew like I'm this is what I've been asking for. I went in with definitely a top of mind knowledge that if I failed after all my huffing and puffing about I'm ready, I want a job, I probably wouldn't get another head coaching opportunity for maybe the next 5 years at least. I may be humbled to a degree where I don't even know at what level I resurface as an assistant coach. I'd done a good job in my previous three teams, so maybe I could have gone back where I was, or somebody somewhere, but you don't know. It's a massive roll of the dice as far as that would be year 5 overseas. It felt like my career was very fragile. Coaching in general is a very unstable and very fragile profession as far as your standing in the coaching world. You can be top of the world, maybe it goes all the way over to the NBA, where Mike Budenholzer had won an NBA championship, and 2 years later he's fired. Nick Nurse won an NBA championship, and 3 years later he's left Toronto. Like it's a very much a what have you done for me lately business. That's why it's high performance. Um, so I went in with this mountain of pressure to a situation that wasn't far, far from ideal. Many elements of it are suboptimal. There's a language barrier. There's massive financial challenges. There's being evaluated and judged by people who don't really know basketball. Our GM was a full-time lawyer, and he moonlit as GM of this club with a board of is it a board member. There's a board constituted of like 4 other guys, none of which really knew basketball. One was a former player he was the most opinionated and the most dangerous, but he'd never coached, never. These people don't know what effective management and leadership really looks like. They never studied it. Just been vested with that responsibility. Um, so there were a wealth of challenges, and spent the first few months just trying to make sure my team didn't fall apart for financial reasons, for visa reasons. So um, every day you kind of wake up wearing that pressure and that responsibility that this thing is gonna unravel, and with it may go my very fragile career. But maybe it's like Jim Collins, Good to Great. It's an amazing book. One of the first books I read when I was starting out as an assistant in Russia. And I kind of started out on this mission of trying to learn everything I could about effective management and effective leadership. And he talked about one of the elements he has a criteria for level 5 leadership, which he sees as the highest. And one of them is like this ability to stare down and look honestly at the challenges that you're facing, not ducking your head into the sand, acknowledging those face on, and how just no matter how perilous they may be, and retaining a sense of optimism and belief that they can be overcome. No, I'm being overly verbose with it. I go back into my notes and check what exactly he called it, but that was my responsibility to stare down and rather than avoid. You kind of have to attack head on all the challenges that are the imminent threats to your organization, and tackle those with relentless optimism that you will not be deterred. And that is was one of the hardest things I ever did.
Hmm. Is it ever hard to stay present amidst all of the volatility of the kind of coaching business?
Um, one of the classic kind of coaching adages for a older coach tells younger coach, you got to be where your feet are, man. You got to be where your feet are. You got to, um, and they've become cliches because they kind of proliferate year on year. There's a grain of truth to them, that there's a huge amount of anxiety, especially in the off season for many coaches that are on 1 year deals, or the person they're working for is leaving or has gotten fired, or the coaching carousel. It's obviously it's very well publicized now, but it's been going on for many years. Yeah, it definitely generates a lot of anxiety, the great unknown from year to year about how exactly you navigate this very uncertain and volatile career. um, Staying present is the embracing the reality that everybody loves a winner. I had no greater success in my career than you it got reconnecting this to kind of my experience in Slovakia, and then getting to be a head coach again between these last two seasons with the Breakers and the local New Zealand league with the Franken Bulls. um, you take on the responsibility and the weight of failure, but you equally yield the credit of success. You put your name on the line, and you either benefit or you suffer accordingly. So there's no greater benefit than winning. When everybody loves a winner, this is an outcome based, a results based business. Performance matters and results matter. Everybody wants to say trust the process, but it's a very short-sighted mindset that I've been bred in European basketball. There's almost never a 5 year plan or a 3 year plan. It's a 3 month plan or maybe a 3 game plan. I've seen very good coaches get fired 3 or 4 games into a season because it hasn't started as they had expected. So being present amidst that anxiety is understanding that I try to. There's a good acronym for our guy that I use for our players called WIN, WIN, and it's what's important now. And you say
Hmm.
amidst all the feelings and all the distractions, what is controllable? What is controllable and what can we impact that moves the needle in the present moment, and winning just that moment, that issue, that discussion, that defensive stop, whatever it may be. You kind of just figuring out how to piece those together consistently. Consistency has always been one of kind of the pillars that my teams have operated under: gratitude, consistency, competitiveness, communication. um, Consistency is a big one for me. So just waking up and making sure that I'm bringing the same energy to the gym every day, the same level of attention, the same level of preparation. Doing the job helps be present because I have a standard for myself, and wanting to do that job to that standard. If I'm not 100% there mentally, I'm going to fall short of my own bar. And that's the worst thing I think anybody can do. You can't lie to yourself, you can lie to everybody else.
Hmm. Yeah. Is there any chance you could finish the story of what happened with your season in Slovakia? So the first couple of months, you were kind of scrambling, trying to keep the team
Mm.
together. Um, what happened next? How did the rest of the season unfold?
Um, so we started 4-0. Then one of our import five man, who was, I think, had the tools to be the best player in the league. He played at Portsmouth. Was we identified they get 5 imports in the Slovakian league. I think I identified 5 distressed assets, to steal a term from my head coach in New Zealand. That's what you're
What
looking
what
for
does
in the
that
market.
mean?
A distressed asset is exactly that. It's something that you identify as misplaced or misvalued in the market. There's been an
Mm,
assessment on what this player, person, item is worth, and it's due to a variety of adverse circumstances that you think are correctable. Uh, you try to take advantage of the diminished value. You know that it's being misassessed, and for us, that's a player I'd coached in college who was, due to COVID, due to politics in the G League, due to a variety of reasons, didn't play the year before, but was desperate to get back in. That was Hofstra, conference Colonial Athletic CAA Player of the Year, also Portsmouth player, leaves his European team because of COVID and he's homesick, joins the G League bubble, politics, doesn't play at all, has to basically get a fresh start in Europe. This guy, shoulder injury, uh, another guy, rookie out of college, just all these guys that I say, okay, I think there's something there because we had to find creative solutions with our financial limitations. Um, so this guy uh, has a meniscus tear or some sort of knee issue. We don't have the medical resources necessary to properly evaluate the guy and to get him proper treatment. He's After hobbling around for 2 weeks, we start to try to do some PT on my couch in my apartment. Like this is as unprofessional as it can possibly be, um, which is insane in hindsight. But uh, we get him ready to come back. He's going through a high speed, full intensity workout, probably way sooner than he should have. The knee swells up, it spirals out of control. He leaves. We need to find a replacement for him. We bring in another guy. We went from 4-0 to 6-6. I remember feeling like going into that 13th game, if we fell below 500, I felt like I might lose my job. It was, I felt it was a pivotal moment. It wasn't expressed that way. It wasn't explicitly stated, but I felt a considerable amount of pressure around that game. Maybe it was self imposed, but the tenor of the conversations, the questions being asked of me, I was like, there's a lot of doubt around how I'm leading this group. Um, yeah, there was a clear concept of how we wanted to play and the tools we needed, but I think with our financial limitations, I didn't hit 5 home runs right from the beginning. Um, it's kind of the nature of player evaluation. That's why NBA teams have an entire staff dedicated to identifying and properly vetting talent. It's not just the tools; it's the fit into the concept as a person. Can they handle X, Y, Z adverse situations? So we replaced that guy, and then there's still two guys that I feel aren't a perfect fit from a basketball standpoint. And one of the hardest decisions I ever made was cutting guys. I cut two players and replaced them over the course of that season, still in the first half of it. But lo and behold, once we got the right pieces in place, we win the midseason tournament. It's called the Slovak Cup. The team hadn't done that in 16 years. Uh, and we ride that momentum to tying for second place in the regular season. In the semifinals, we beat a team that had beaten us 4 times in the regular season. We were 0-4 against them. We beat them 3-1 in the semifinal series, and we lost in the finals to a powerhouse. This is the most decorated team in the last 10 years in that league. A big financial gap in the budgets, but altogether, the most successful season that team had had in 16 years.
Wow, yeah, that's an incredible story. To sort of transition here, is there any fear associated with, let's say, chasing your dreams as a head coach or a coach? Because you have an extremely strong academic background, got an Ivy League degree. There are probably a bunch of jobs that you could have gotten that are more, let's say, conventionally prestigious or sexier, maybe higher paying. Um, is it scary to maybe sacrifice those options and pursue what you're pursuing now?
Absolutely. I think it gives both myself and my parents a great deal of anxiety and concern about navigating just step to step, year on year. I think I've been very fortunate over the last 7 years that every decision I've made and every pivot I've made has served me well as far as growing my career. But you look on the aggregate over to compare a lot of coaching resumes and coaching trajectories. It's incredibly hard to plot the course, to really have a clear set plan, a trajectory of growth outside of the NBA. In international basketball, you reach the mountaintop and then you get humbled, you get fired, and you climb again, and you hop over as an assistant, and you come back as a head coach. It's extremely unstable. Uh, the running joke now that I've been doing this long enough is that if a young coach comes to me and asks, thinking about getting into coaching, my obligation is to say, if you can do anything else, do it. And it's because I had somebody tell me that, say, you're a smart kid, do something else. And it's only those that ignore that cautionary tale that probably end up sticking it out. There's plenty of guys who try to coach for a year and I say, I want to do something else. This is too hard or not worth the time or the effort or the stress or the instability or the low pay. Or it's an affliction to a degree. I'm addicted to not necessarily the lifestyle, but the what the game gives you. You live in 5 different countries over 7 years. You say, oh, that must be lonely. That must be challenging. There are stressors on your personal relationships, but you do get thrust into a mini community year on year. That's the element of a team, and that's why team sport can be so intoxicating, and it's so attractive, that you get to be a part of something bigger than yourself, and you get to know a group of people intimately. You get to strive towards something together and succeed and fail, and that adversity and that success, it bonds people together. And like now I get to see a guy I coached in my first year in Russia is leading the EuroLeague in assists. Like it's such a gratifying and amazing thing to see people's journeys and to know that you were a small part of that and you contributed to that. So that part's very gratifying, and it kind of keeps the wind in the sails for me. But it's treacherous. These are choppy waters, and it's hard to know what the right next step is overseas. That's why I think there's a lot of appeal now more than ever. The G League next year with the Phoenix team will be 1-to-1. Every NBA team will have a G League team. Teams are utilizing them to an extensive degree, players and coaches both spending time down and then matriculating up. It's more of a clear and logical pathway. You become the company man. You get in early. You keep your head down. Eric Spoelstra, obviously, is the emblem of the path. Whether it be the video room or the G League, you start at the bottom. You do a great job. You speak when spoken to. Otherwise, write down all your opinions instead of saying them out loud. And you slowly but gradually climb. And that is probably much more appealing than wading through the dark waters of international basketball.
What would you say is the hardest thing about your job?
People are the ultimate performance variable. It's one of my favorite quotes. Um, the hardest thing is it's the puzzle. The people puzzle of basketball is you have 12 to 15 different people with different backgrounds, with different perspectives, with different priorities, with different needs, with different responsibilities. And your responsibility is to meet them where they're at and help to get them where they're trying to go, and marry that with the team's mission and how figuring out where each of those individuals needs to get to in order to optimize the team goal, and along the way getting those individuals to sacrifice a small part of what they think they want or need in order to benefit the group. It's a massive, massive challenge year on year. No two puzzles are ever the same, and that's definitely part of what's addicting about it. But it's definitely the hardest part of the job.
Do you ever burn out? You're constantly thinking about basketball. It's a huge
Uh,
part of,
yeah, I think
yeah.
building
Uh,
in building in variety, building in balance, knowing that I'm getting better at my job by not thinking about basketball is a real thing. Like that. I when I'm stepping out of it opens up room for creativity. Like that's why there's a lot of value in organizations and bringing in an outside perspective, somebody who hasn't been drinking the Kool-Aid for X amount of months, whatever point you are in the season, an outsider, whether it be somebody who doesn't know anything about basketball at all. It's like, huh, it's interesting that you guys do this in your organization. And you say, huh, we never thought about it that way. It's just fresh eyes are hard to come by. So removing yourself from that space, one, opens up room for creativity, and two, yeah, burnout is real. It's I think the mental health, mental performance, that's the new frontier. That's not so new, but it's finally getting invested in pretty unanimously at the highest levels of sport, whether it be basketball or otherwise. Um, I'm wary of it. I'm cautious of it. But the love helps. The obsession helps. But I've also just kind of maintained a healthy curiosity around other things for quite some time. Most of it being performance based anyway. Neuroscience, the language, communication, leadership. Yeah, I almost wish I had a penchant for reading more fiction. It's definitely something
mhm.
my brother's been on me about, some of the missed opportunities. I used to write in that space. That kind of narrative fiction. Um, it's probably something I need to get back to.
What about when your players burn out? What's your response to that as a head coach or a assistant coach?
Dude, you guys just come to practice and then you go home and play video games. What are you burning out about? um, Players definitely have more time to distract themselves. The the burnout of a European season is it's just so damn long. It can be 9 to 10 months that you're away from family or a variety of challenges. It's the sheer duration, the staying power. And that's where I think good coaches are stealing any opportunity to create some sort of off-court engagement, bring the group together, do something fun. They're intelligent about the FIBA breaks when you have an extended amount of days between games, giving a good chunk off. I think that was we got into the Slovak league is tiny bit shorter than the majority of European leagues, so we got into the February FIBA window. It was like 10 days, I think 10, 11 days in its entirety, and we were going to be going to the playoffs in the end of March. So it was really just a quick stretch run that we need to get back to. And my intention was for us to be preparing for a lengthy playoff run. I didn't want to get to the end of the first round and all guys can think about is going home. um, First round is best of three, second round best of five, finals best of seven. This thing could drag on for quite some time, and I wanted mentally my best players, or the Americans, fully engaged and committed to the stretch run. So I let these guys go back to the states. One of our best player, it was his daughter's birthday. He got to do that. It was all very important to him, and like probably X 2 or 3 days more than I was really comfortable with. I As a young coach, you have the anxiety around preparation. I want to be the most prepared team in the league. I want to practice, practice, practice. But was that best for their mental and physical well-being? That was probably the best decision I made. That whole season was giving them that time. They came back fresh. They came back motivated. They came back engaged. So stealing rest where possible is a big part of it, and then engaging these guys. It's not like the team building stuff, the off court stuff. It's like, oh, it's nice if you don't win, it's not worth shit. But you probably win because you do it to a degree. It's intangible. It's hard to measure, but we went paintballing like 2 months prior to that. Like, just guys, the joy that we actively and greatly enjoy doing something together other than basketball, and we have that shared experience. Uh, it matters. So I'm trying to steal as many of those as possible over the course of a season. The NBA is an entirely different monster. Getting to see it up close this last month, where you have 4 games in a 7-day period in different cities, flight after flight after flight. Um, I definitely understand less is more. Doc Rivers was known for the adage "fresh minds and fresh legs," because both can seem so elusive in that kind of schedule. Um, yeah, definitely a lot more I'd like to learn about how they keep guys fresh over an 82 game season, because it's a monster.
Yeah, I remember one of my AAU coaches, he just said this and it has always stuck with me. He was like, anyone who's played or coached at a high level knows that sleep is a challenge. Is it is it tough to figure out, when you're gonna fit in 8 hours of sleep if you're constantly traveling, constantly competing, constantly working?
Yeah. One of the most interesting books I ever read is Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. So I highly recommend it to any listeners. Definitely changed my perspective around sleep and its importance. All that happens while we sleep. Obviously, athletes needing sleep for physical recovery was not new. It's just kind of been underscored with all the research that's come out. For coaches that want to do the job to the depth and detail that I've grown accustomed to, something's got to give sometimes, especially if you have multiple games in close proximity to each other. Like, that's just going to be a rough week, you know. But I also think too, one of the biggest mistakes I think I made was then being a head coach in the New Zealand League. It's a single elimination playoff. It's like a tournament basically. Once you get to the end of the season, and we had won our quarterfinal, and the semifinal was the next day. Um, yeah, not super professional, unfortunately, but there was a variety of mistakes that we as an organization made around optimizing the turnaround. But for me myself, it was a late finish to that game, and I went home and watched film on our opponent, and then had to get up early, get the film together for the get and kind of chart the game plan out to present to these guys in the pregame that we met in the afternoon. And I think that was a big mistake because we got to game time and there was an important decision that needed to be made. We were like, obviously, we're dragging ass. This team hadn't played the night before. Uh, we're a little bit fatigued. We're not fully prepared because we haven't gotten to practice any of the game plan elements. This team had beaten us pretty badly during the regular season once. Um, so we're 12, 15 down, just trying to stay in the game. And there was a bit of a moment where looking back, I should have pressed the quote unquote fuck it button, where there's like this, you change defense and you try to muck up the game and it either gets you back or you lose by 40, but it's only one or the other, but this middling 18, 20, 17, 15, where you're not in the game, but you're not out of the game. It's like basketball purgatory. Um, we shouldn't have stayed there. And like and there were a variety of small adjustments that could have been made, some better play calling. And I didn't have my full mental faculties. I could feel the fatigue of having 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and I undermined myself and I undermined our team. And it's like sleep matters. I'm not superhuman, and I've never been a guy who's been massive on caffeine. So you put those two together, the caffeine is supposed to, inhibit those sleep markers, that are dragging your eyelids down, but sleep matters. It really does, and I think it's a massive performance tool. Um, and I think everybody's been beating that drum recently.
One of the things that we've talked about a lot and off the podcast, obviously, is like how much of a sacrifice is it to become the best? How much do you have to give up to become the best at what you do? Can you have a social life on top of, building whatever you're building, whether that be a skill set, a business, a team, whatever that may be?
It's a great question. It's kind of one I'm still answering for myself. Um, there's a lot of conversation around this now, but I look to everybody looks to the pinnacle of each industry to understand the highest performers. What are they doing? There's been some conversation around like Mike Malone from Denver. Come playoff time, or really most of the season, his family's very understanding that he's checked out. Like he's fully committed to the group. Tom Thibodeau, one of the most respected coaches in the league, basketball is everything for him. He's not a family man. Um, but I had this conversation with my head coach during our exit meeting. Kind of around finding a way to give room to all the elements in one's life that are important to them. And it's not that they have to get weighted equally, but they do need to be addressed. And he talked about, I think it's Steve Magnus and Brad Stolberg have a Peak Performance is one of their books, but they've collaborated on a lot of stuff around the mental health and high performance and what the best do. And talk about working in sprints. It's not that you can address each aspect of your life with equal attention and effort, or even like color block it out, where basketball gets 30%, my family gets 10-12%, and try to just like compartmentalize every aspect of your life and schedule it out. My head coach talked about that failing for him, and he's an elite planner. He tried to plan each aspect of that, and he talked about it's more about working in a sprint and knowing that whatever's on the back burner, it'll kind of need to pivot and flip at a certain point. That if this is the basketball time, then I go head down and I give max effort to the basketball time. But there has to come a point where if this is family time, I give my undivided energy and effort to the family time. And that whatever is, again, on the back burner gets addressed and given the necessary attention in its time, rather than trying to do it all at once. But the sacrifices are inherent. There's no workaround for the time, for the reps that are required to outperform, because it's generally, it's Einstein, right? He says, it's not that I'm smarter than anybody, I just spend more time with the problem than anybody reasonably would. And I think that in a nutshell addresses high performance across a lot of industries. And you talk about, well, the flow, the book Flow, talking about reaching that state. I think it's Naval Ravikant who talks about finding an activity that's work for somebody else but play for you. When you're at play, the time cost seems less relevant because there's nothing else you'd rather be doing. And then as you mature as an adult and other people and other responsibilities surface in your life, you can't play all the time, but it makes the time investment easier when you can get lost in the sauce of the project.
One of the first books that you recommended to me was Mindset by Carol Dweck. What does this book mean to you, and how have you applied the ideas from this book?
Mindset is Carol Dweck. I believe she's a Stanford professor. And just her research around basically how we get in our own way, and how there's a self-limiting belief around what is and what is not possible. And the general premise is that everything is learnable. Everything is subject to growth and change and improvement if you believe it is. So it's kind of this priming yourself for what is or what is not possible, as this self-defeatist mentality and the self-fulfilling prophecy, we should say. And Henry Ford used to say, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I think that that's a very brief summary of the research that Carol Dweck has done, and the power of how we perceive people and ourselves and how it affects our behavior, whether we realize it or not. I think it was important for me as a teacher, a basketball coach, to see myself as a teacher, my mindset around the responsibility to teach and not discarding players or my students based on their my perception around their capacity to learn. If I think everybody is equally talented or equally capable of retaining what I'm teaching, I give them all each my best effort, rather than saying because one of the studies I think was around uh, teachers receiving information on aptitude tests, uh, and the study was that the results of the aptitude test, according to the teacher, what the information the teachers received was flipped. The low aptitude kids were the teachers were told that the low aptitude kids from the test were actually high aptitude, and vice versa, and they gave those children the subsequent attention that they thought corresponded to their outcome. Oh, this kid's high aptitude, I'm going to give him more attention, and the performance gap manifested itself. The high aptitude kid who the teacher thought was low aptitude did worse because he got less attention from the teacher, and vice versa. So uh, believing in people and thinking that everybody's capable of doing something unique, something special, and our responsibility to identify that and tap into that, especially as a coach. I think it was very formative for me.
Yeah. So, in terms of kind of choosing the beliefs that we have, whether that be a growth or a fixed mindset, how much choice do you think we have over like what we believe? Like, do you think someone can really choose to, adopt a differing belief?
I was just going through my notes on a book I'd read, The Psychology of Money, by Morgan Housel. And one of the quotes I had highlighted, I'm going back through the book to try to kind of transfer those quotes and things I liked over to my notes, and said one of the hardest things to do, regardless of level of intelligence, even the smartest people, is to change behavior. And I think changing behavior stems from changing belief and changing thought process. Is it possible? Absolutely. But unfortunately, I think the reality is that for a lot of people to change how they go about their daily life, it requires something incredibly jarring sometimes, a massive degree of failure or adversity or trauma. And yeah, that's why I think keeping top of mind that that awareness that you don't know, that that trying to issue the certainty that you have a process and you know what's effective, that I know that I do not know adage is really important, because it keeps you open and receptive to the fact that there's a way I'm doing it that may be yielding results, but there also could be an even better way that could yield even better results. And that's really, really hard. I think it's definitely possible to reshape one's beliefs, but it takes an overwhelming amount of evidence.
So then how do you change the belief? Like let's say I've identified that I have a belief that isn't serving me. Do you think it's I guess you sort of alluded to the acknowledgement that I might be wrong about this. I'm not sure that this belief is true. And that awareness of me potentially being wrong could manifest itself in me changing my belief over the long term. Or I don't know. What are your thoughts on how people can change their beliefs?
But I think you have to come up against, I mean, if you've, the first step is self-awareness, right? The first step to behavior change, and you talk about like kind of atomic habits or anything like this, the first step to uh, active behavior change is the awareness that there's something that's not serving you that you'd like to change. And then from there, there's a series of steps around cultivating an environment that helps optimize behavior change. There's a whole variety of things that obviously James Clear can elucidate way better than I can. around what real behavior change looks like. And I guess in large part, belief and behavior are synonymous, because you don't act without incentive, act without belief around something, even as minute as I believe that multigrain is healthier than white bread. So the behavior that you associate with that belief is the consumer purchase, But I just try to make a very basic analogy that belief and behavior I kind of think are synonymous because one doesn't act without beliefs or values.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there is a sort of bidirectional relationship between beliefs and behaviors, because on the one hand, like, your beliefs kind of shape what you do, but on the other hand, what you do kind of changes what you believe. I mean, James Clear talks about it a lot in the book, where doing a certain habit kind of registers in your mind as like a vote of you being that type of person. So, like, the more you go to the gym, it's like
You become
you're
somebody in
voting.
the gym. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, you're voting for yourself as the type of person who takes care of their health and well-being. So yeah,
Act as
interesting.
if, they say act as if. Uh,
Mm,
it kind of connects with like the old school kind of dress for the job you want, not the job you have type of thing.
yeah. What's the difference between a coach and a teacher? You mentioned that earlier.
I see none. I see the basketball court as our classroom, and the responsibility is the same. There's a our responsibility is to see a person with a particular set of skills and a particular capacity to grow in X, Y, Z directions, and it's to facilitate that growth, to meet them where they are, to communicate as effectively as possible, to believe in them more than they believe in themselves, and just to nurture human talent.
Mm. I actually did want to ask you, you've brought up a lot of books. Why spend so much time reading about topics that might, I mean, a lot of the books we've discussed are very related to your work and what you do, but it's clear from knowing you for a while that you've read a lot of books about things that are not obviously or directly related to coaching. Why?
Uh, I just think that it connected to kind of what is you said the hardest part of coaching is people, and there's just so many different avenues through which we can learn more and understand people better that don't feel maybe directly. It's not an athlete book. A lot of what I read was in business or neuroscience, where it's like, what are the roots of behavior? What are the roots of getting people aligned? And then you can distill down and take what's useful and apply it to basketball directly. But I think that the people are a mystery that I'll study and try to solve for my entire life, and I'll only get incrementally closer. It'll kind of be that asymptote of mastery. I'll get closer and closer, but I don't think I'll ever have all the answers because people are so variable and so context dependent, and you'll always run into a situation that you're not 100% sure how to handle, and then you kind of reach back into the tool bag of all the different situations you may have been exposed to. um, and I think it was important for me to supplement what I'd been exposed to because I was a young coach who hadn't seen so much. So I try to lean on the wisdom of and experience of others, and that's distilled to an incredible degree within the spines of books.
All right, so transitioning into some basketball stuff. One of the questions that I had was, so we've spent a ton of time together working on, my jump shot and improving my shooting ability. I've been wondering, to ask your opinion as a trainer and someone who's spent a considerable amount of time teaching shooting to a lot of different people. How do you teach it to a younger kid? Because on the one hand, shooting is a skill that requires years and years of repetition, but on the other, it may require a certain level of foundational strength in order to shoot the ball properly. So if someone doesn't have that level of foundational strength, how are you teaching them the fundamentals?
Yeah, you know, It's funny. When I was talking to my head coach in New Zealand, an incredibly intelligent, self-reflective person, and this was the first year. It's only his second season or third. He had a half season in Jerusalem. It's only his second year as a head coach. Last year, for a variety of reasons, we couldn't do exit interviews, and this year he wanted to do an exit process. He wanted to put together a list of questions and have a process. And he consulted with me. I sent him what I had done when I was the head coach in both of my teams, the questions I'd asked, and afterwards I'd asked him how it went, and he talked about kind of the mixed feedback. And the most important thing he said was, yeah, the most I hope some of it was good, some of it was bad. I hope in 5 years' time I look back, I'm not doing it the same way we are now. Like that. It's everything is an iterative process, and you're learning from it. And I prefaced the answer to your question this way because I've learned a lot about teaching, and I think that's the most important thing when you want to be a skills trainer or a skill development person. What it means to develop skill, and a lot of that is grounded in the science of teaching pedagogy, and like the steps required and how people internalize information and how it's best to structure the information so that it's retained and can be applied, and what skill really is. It's a manifestation of your response to a particular set of circumstances, the conditions that call for XYZ response to what the defense is doing, specifically speaking to basketball. As far as shooting goes, I've learned that we're making a massive mistake in the United States around how it's done. Smaller child, smaller ball, lower basket. This is how you can create a functional shooting technique that grows with the child, rather than trying to correct someone slinging the ball across their body, heaving it towards the basket because the ball is oversized and the basket is way too high. Across Europe, Spain is the best example. Uh, the ball grows with the children. You have like a size 5 or a size 6 until you're 12 or something, and you're shooting on an 8-foot hoop. And then you can see ball under hand under ball, lift, follow through, all the rudiments of shooting technique, for better or for worse. The most fundamental things we're familiar with are able to hold because they don't have to make any physical compensations to reach the basket. That's how I would like to do it going forward.
Do you think there might be a muscle memory issue though associated with that if they learn to shoot on a smaller hoop and you're sort of enforcing a moving target? So what do you think that's a problem, or do you think that would resolve itself, or I guess you just think it's so much better than the alternative, which is full size ball, 10-foot hoop,
I mean,
7-year-old slinging the ball across their body.
not at all. I think the act is to scale. When the physical human has said parameters, the distance to the basket should be like so, and as those parameters change, you scale the height of the basket with it
Mhm.
accordingly. It's just physics.
Fair enough. Uh, are there certain skills that, with the exception of genetics, that you just can't coach? Like, are there certain things that just only come with time and playing and maybe not so much intention and reflection, uh, but just playing over and over and over again? Like, it seems like when I was playing, I would notice that some players just kind of had a basketball instinct, if that makes sense. Uh, have you experienced that as a trainer? Like, have you noticed certain skills that only get developed through just hours and hours of competing?
I definitely think these the most recent generations of players that are coming up now are losing something from the lack of unstructured play. It's like you're either only with a trainer or you're only with a team, rather than the competitive setting, competitive, unstructured, unmonitored setting of the park. 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 1-on-1, 4-on-4. every so often you'd get full court, but nobody wanted to give up you two baskets when there could be different groups playing on each end. Um, and I think whether that fosters the competitive element, which I think is very hard to teach. There's a little bit of innate. Um, I think it's bred, whether it's bred by a person or by the conditions that someone comes up in. That that steeling oneself to adversity, the grit, another great book, uh, that gets fostered from pulling yourself through the mud and through the shit and coming out the other side alive and stronger is important. Um, but the feel piece that you're talking about, and what coaches talk about, IQ and feel, it is incredibly difficult to find a way to foster that in a player. You just say, and it's frustrating from a coach's standpoint, where you want to say that everything that makes a player effective, you should be able to teach. But there's this, you talk about it's native to a player, that this level of anticipation and creativity. And I think what's very important is this absence of fear. I think back to myself as a player and how much in the park I was a different player than I was in a team setting. That I've been playing with this absence of fear, and that frees up room for creativity, where one's talents, be that instinct, be that vision and anticipation as a passer, be that shooting, whatever it's both cultivated and it's instinctive, gets to shine through and flourish. But the feel piece is a really tricky one. We don't even know, before we can figure out how to teach it, we need to know how to measure it, and it's totally intangible to us
Mm.
right now. It's a combination of factors that we say. It's how he passes, it's how he cuts, it's how he screens, it's how he runs the floor, and how he, you know, I think the equivalent in soccer is when players make runs on the goal, and they or passes across the field into space, that they can anticipate these players are about to move here, and there's going to be a gap that's going to open, and I'm going to punch it. That's the soccer equivalent that we're talking about, where you say those players. I think they've started to figure out in soccer that the best players in the world are scanning more than anyone else, and I think it's applicable to basketball, which is why it's really important that you can dribble the ball without looking down. As far as like they're scanning, they're anticipating, scanning, anticipating their vision, where their eyes go, where what the best look at. The coaches, good, great coaches coach the eyes. They're telling you what to look at and when, and that's your cue that triggers the skill. It's perception and action coupling is the language around modern skill acquisition. And I think what the best look at is what you try to teach, but putting it all together to what we call now feel. Yeah, I wish I could coach feel. Maybe there are better coaches that can.
Yeah. What is something you have changed your mind about as a coach?
I just talked about shooting as one of them. I think I made a lot of progress in a lot of different areas, a lot of tactical ones. But as far as like skill work goes, um how much you can gain from the on air 1-on-0 workout has diminished considerably for me. I'm thinking about how to teach the rudiments of the skill, what I'd like it to look like, which is already inherently a little bit flawed. That I'm not creating an environment where self-organization takes place, like what's organic to that player, rather than what I envision as the perfect mold of what that skill executed looks like. Uh, but I teach the basic premise, combine that with what's organic for them, and then get them into a contested setting as quickly as possible, where that skill needs to get executed versus defense in a game like situation. Um, that has increased exponentially for me versus the 1-on-0 reps, where it looks good and it's exactly how I want it to look, and then it comes up again. This is the Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Like that the skill, quote unquote, not skill because it doesn't hold up to the stress test of the game environment. So that's been definitely a quantum leap forward in recent years.
Is there ever a time where good defense beats good offense? I
No,
know we've all no,
I
never.
don't. I don't think so. I think the it's because great offense responds to defense. Right, you're going to run an action. There's going to be a cover, and the best players in the world discern, identify, and execute the best response available to that cover as well as anybody in the world. And then it comes down to their skill in that execution. Like this guy does this, I pop, gaps a pin down, I pop back. My ability to get balance, get my eyes on the rim, seam the ball, and shoot. That's a practice skill, but it's the identification at the moment of the screen that this guy's gapping, and my answer is to pop back. Um, that whatever you choose, this is why coaches, me myself, obsessed around the on ball screen, because it's not just a response that the player gets right. You can educate the entire team on the best collective response, and you can pick apart the defense from there. There's always going to be an answer to the cover, um, and the best offense will beat the best defense because there's a weakness to every defense.
Hmm. Got it. All right. Well, we've hit the hour. Thank you for doing this, man.
Oh no, it's good questions. I enjoyed it. I love to hear myself talk.